Alright, let's get back to it then. More 1979, the revolution. Thanks for sticking around. Interestingly, what isn't clear from this game up to this point, I'm not sure if they'll explain this or not, but is the decision to impose military law by the Shah and America's part in that, which was interesting. Remember, Jimmy Carter was the president of America at the time. Not for much longer, but Schiff has arrived. Welcome, Schiff. How you doing? The Shah reached out to America, and they were good friends at the time, political friends, because of the oil exports. America was arming the Iranians and getting cheap oil in return. And the Americans sent a very confused message back. The message really wasn't very clear. So the Shah was seeking guidance. Should he crack down on these protesters or not? And the Shah actually did a press release to the media at the time, the state-owned media. But anyway, in it he said that he understands the cause of the protesters and said that he's not surprised that they're protesting. And then went and imposed military law, which led to a lot of violence, naturally, which really served to fuel more protests. So the Shah's message was very confused itself, and the Americans really could have done a better job of, well, acting as peacekeepers, I guess. Because remember, it was in the American interest to keep the Shah in power, because they needed these cheap oil exports. But whichever way you see this going, you know, like whether you personally support the Shah and his regime or the protesters, which eventually led to the appointment of Ayatollah Khomeini, the Shah really did bungle that, but some of that blame has to lie with the Americans. Persia, at the time when there was the Shah, says Schiff. He is familiar with this situation, I see.
Balak is dead!
Mulhones has joined us over on YouTube as well.
Is that what you wanted to know?
I want to know how you could choose a terrorist like Ali over your own brother.
Ali was not a terrorist, Hossein.
They say your first instinct reveals your true nature. Time for games is over, Reza.
No. What? Hossein?
Yes, Reza.
What's going on?
How can you abandon your brother for Ali? Huh?
Hossein, what are you talking about? I never abandoned you.
Playtime's over, Dadash. Do you hear me?
Why are you helping him?
Betrayed me. You betrayed my mother and father.
You work for him now? 2 years ago, you would have thrown him in jail.
Show, shut your mouth. I work for Iran, my homeland.
Reza,
Fahmy,
you should be happy. After all, I saved your brother. Less than a year ago, he sat in that very chair. He was meaner, tougher, and angrier than you. The only difference was that he wanted to be saved. Don't you wish you were like your brother?
No matter what, I still love you, big brother.
Bibi. She was the mastermind behind the bombings. She was with you when you were arrested. Where is she?
I don't know.
جواب شو بده. Where is she?
I'll never tell you where she is.
Oh. Wow. That was the wrong time to take a break. I apologise for that. I didn't know we were right at the end of the story. So, 3.5 hours, about enough time to play through the whole game, and you could have played through that a lot more quickly as well. We read absolutely everything that I could come across and listened to all the audio excerpts and everything. So my thoughts on this, and yours are welcome as well in the chat. I praise games like this for being different. Yeah. There's not a lot of games about the Iranian Revolution. It serves to bring a bit of history to gamers, because we don't often see things like this, you know. I'm a fan of history in general, and I'm a keen believer in the fact that we need to learn more about our history so we can learn how to act today. Not a lot of other people would go to the lengths that I do to learn about history. Even that said, I don't know a lot about the Iranian Revolution. It didn't cover as much ground as I thought it would, and although I give it a slight break for being different and obviously made on a fairly low budget, it's lacking. It's lacking. Okay, so the emotional connection that they sought to achieve in this game, it wasn't really achieved, because I don't know Reza's background. We got a sense of that. It was nice to explore the family home and kind of get a sense of who he is and where he comes from. There just wasn't enough of it. What is this relationship with his best friend who ends up dying? Like, we're supposed to feel sad at that moment. I didn't really know, you know. We had a little bit of exposition at the start when they're on the rooftop and they're talking about that, but I don't, apart from the game telling me they've been lifelong friends, there wasn't really any kind of emotional draw to that, you know. What role did Bibi play? Who was actually behind stuff? You know, the bit where I have to pick out who I think was responsible for Abbas being stabbed with a carpet knife. I don't know. That wasn't clear. Did I miss something? Fair enough if I missed something, and that was actually spelled out in the game. I just didn't pick it up on it. But for me, at that moment, it was just a choice. You had to just click on one of 6 people, and I couldn't find a way to decide. You know, I'm assuming this is based on a real family, because you know, all the family photos and the video reels, that they were really nice to see, actually. But you have to establish more of an emotional connection to these characters. It is a very short game. I mean, for the budget they had, it was probably fairly high production values, and it wasn't by AAA standards by any imagination. But also the whole game aspect of the game was severely lacking. And when we talk about games, we talk about, Total Biscuit often mentions this, failure states, right? How much impact did my decisions have on the story? Pretty good, I think, says Mulhernator, his opinion of it. Care to elaborate on that at all? Over on YouTube? You know, the story has to play out in a certain way. I'm sure his mate has to die. You have to get into certain scenes. It doesn't seem like there's any scenes where, you know, they would be optional. Well, you wouldn't get them if you made certain decisions. I don't know for sure, but it doesn't seem like that. It just seems like some of the dialogue options might be a little bit different. And what happens at the end, that is so abrupt, you know. You chose that revolutions are peaceful. You chose not to throw rocks during protests. You chose Jafar as the mole. Well, I don't know. You chose to be defiant while being interrogated. You chose to save Ali over Hussein. But the thing is, the reason I chose to save Ali over Hussein is because we'd already seen a flash forward in which Hussein is alive. So we know he survives. So that forced me to metagame, you know. I didn't want Ali to die, but I knew Hussein was already going to survive, so obviously I was going to choose Ali there. And that's problematic. Very unique story to follow, and it's very convincing, kind of like a movie, says Mulhernator. Was it though? I mean, like, it is different, I'll give it that, but there's not the emotional weight behind it that I wanted there to be, you know? I don't care about this family as much as I should. Like, I wanted to make the right decisions, and I think they did a good job of kind of exploring both sides and showing that there aren't necessarily right decisions there as well. Pink Ranger has arrived. How you doing, Pink Ranger? I haven't seen you in forever. Wow. You've joined right at the end of the story as well, unfortunately. So let me expand on a little bit on the history side of things while we have a look at my choices throughout this game. So the major tipping point, and we don't actually get to this point in the game, where the Shah, he was quite old at the time. He decides he's under so much pressure, even while all this stuff's going on, he decides to take an extended holiday and leave the country, right? That's a major political blunder, I think. How are you, says Pink Ranger? I'm great. We have just played through 1979 Revolution Black Friday and I really enjoyed it. Not as much as I would have liked, but hey, it was £5, so I guess that's what, like about $8 on Steam. And I thought that's a decent price at which to chip in for a 3.5 hour story driven game, especially on a subject like this. So the Shah takes an extended holiday, and the Ayatollah, obviously, who was in Paris at the time, Ayatollah Khomeini, he decides that's the time to move. You know, he just walks into the country and declares himself the leader. And remember in those diaries early on that we were hearing from the news excerpts, that he said that, you know, he's not looking to take up a position of leadership, he just wants to be a guide for his people, you know. Probably around 35 cents, says Mulhernator. Yeah, pound's crashing, we know that after the Brexit. But that's not how it played out. He appointed himself supreme leader of Iran, and although that's what the people wanted, I don't think that at the time they would have wanted Khomeini to come in and act the way he did. I'm not sure, maybe some of them would. It's interesting to me because it happens so much in politics, you know. Somebody makes lots of promises, gets in power, and then those promises change. They change a lot. For the worse in Iran, I think. And Khomeini coming into Iran really spelled the end of the West's relationship with Iran, as sort of like the isolated oasis of tranquility in the Middle East. And this anti-Western feeling was huge in Iran, because people like the Ayatollah blamed the Western influence on Iran as corruption, you know, when in actual fact it was more like the Shah holding on to all the money from the oil exports, in my opinion at least, that caused this. The Islamic Revolution there was pretty much what ISIS is now, says Schiff. Interesting. How do you figure? Go into a little bit more detail on that one. The result was that the American embassy in Iran was stormed by anti-capitalist, anti-American protesters who actually took all of the occupants of the embassy hostage and kept them captive, and that led to the American trade embargo on Iran. So Iran couldn't export any more oil, and that was its main sort of foreign source of income, but it also stopped the supply of weapons to the Iranian militia, the Iranian army, and they wouldn't let them go, you know. You just couldn't, you were kept as a political hostage in Iran. They reported being tortured as well. Schiff says, Islamic extremists that turn everything to shit, beheading people and so forth, establishing a terror dictatorship. Yeah, okay. I mean, on the one hand, yeah. But, I mean, this is a minority, right? So, under Shah, there was still brutality and terror, you know, just in a different form. Suppression of free speech, you know, you couldn't say anything bad about the government. I mean, it still exists in Iran. It's just it's a different form of tyranny, I suppose. And one of the guys who was actually originally involved in the plot to storm the embassy was Ahmadinejad, who would later become president of Iran. And interestingly, he voted, because there was a group of them, and they decided whether to carry out this attack on the embassy. He voted against it at the time. He said, no, I don't want any part of this. He wasn't involved in that. And we all know Ahmadinejad's legacy that led on from that. The thing is, Jimmy Carter's presidency was coming to an end. Yeah. So, in an attempt to win votes, Albert Dinnerjacket, says Lee Wolf. Yeah, that's his unofficial title, I think. Don't call him that to his face. Anyway, so the Americans tried to stage a rescue. It was a risky rescue. They had to fly a long way undercover and airlift these hostages out. They sent a bunch of commandos, a bunch of helicopters. During the rescue, there was a sandstorm in the desert, which grounded the helicopters, and they were forced to withdraw because they needed 6 helicopters to carry all of the troops. They took 8, and 3 of them were damaged, so they only had 5 to rescue the hostages, I should say. The thing with that was that they'd already decided, unless they can rescue all of the hostages, they wouldn't rescue any of them, because they were sure that the hostages would be executed by the Iranian rulers, if any remained. The problem was, pulling out, there was an accident involving a helicopter and a fuel tanker, which led to the deaths of a whole bunch of people. And obviously that had to go to the press. So the Americans woke up one morning to find loads of their men had been killed in the desert in Iran, staging an evacuation of hostages that nobody wanted or knew about. I mean, people might have wanted it. People might have wanted America to try if they'd known about it, but only the president and a select few people knew about it. So that really did it in for Jimmy Carter at the time. And, well, the thing was that Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, then saw an opportunity. Yeah, they saw a major opportunity to seize power in Iran. There was political instability. The Ayatollah hadn't been in power very long. Not everyone was happy with the fact that he just sort of snatched up power when he said he just wanted to be a religious sort of guidance, a wise man to the country. And Iraq invaded, in a war that would last 8 years. Iraq invaded Iran at a time when Iran couldn't get military supplies, because remember, the trade embargo is in place, yeah? So they can't get supplies for their military. The situation's looking pretty bleak. America seized all of their foreign assets, billions and billions of dollars, so they can't even have the money to buy anything from anywhere. And so eventually this led to Iran releasing the hostages. But here's the key. This was exactly at the time when the presidential inauguration was due to happen. And Reagan came to power in America. The Iranians actually waited, even though they'd agreed to release the hostages, they waited until 20 seconds after Reagan had accepted the presidency, so that Jimmy Carter couldn't have the credit. 20 seconds after he was sworn in as president, so that Jimmy Carter got no credit whatsoever for freeing these hostages. And then they all came back. But then obviously the Iraq-Iran conflict was hugely costly as well. And it's basically been an Islamic republic ever since. So yeah, going back to my thoughts on the game in general. For me, it's too short. It told a story. There were no frills. There were no real game elements in it. We need some kind of failure state. We need some kind of more interactive elements, I think, in the game. It was a great effort I really respect them for trying to make this, you know. I think that they'd handled it very carefully. They let the player decide on the politics of this. Don't forget, Iran is hardly a place where you can express yourself freely, even to this day. Not like the concept of freedom we know in the West. So, I think it's quite brave to release this. It could be seen as, you know, some kind of political propaganda. Honestly, I don't know. But yeah, it is lacking. It is lacking. Like, £5 for 3.5 hours is, yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I don't know if I'd wanted to pay full price for this, but I do hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Islamic Revolution of Iran. I certainly have. And maybe it'll encourage you to go out and find a little bit more about it, unless you're already an expert. I'm sure Mulhernator is. He probably knows everything about it. But it would be interesting as well to find out if anyone who... it wasn't that long ago, you know, 1979 is not that far off. It'd be interesting to see if anyone who lived through that in Iran has actually played this and what they make of this story. That would be pretty fascinating. Overall, I'm fairly satisfied with the decisions I made. Not too much, says Mulhernator. Really? I mean, that surprises me a little bit. Would I recommend it as a game? If you watched me play through the entire thing, I would say no. Obviously, it's mainly about the story, it's not really about the gameplay elements. But as a piece of art, I think it's a valiant effort. Absolutely. I would like to see, because this leaves itself open to quite a lot of sequels, you know, like what happened after. We don't even get to see the Ayatollah come into Iran in this particular game. Just the build up to it, and even the build up missed out certain key historical elements for me, which is a shame. Like the involvement of the Americans. I mean, they were clear about the CIA's involvement in the coup d'etat in 1953. They weren't so clear about the American dealings with the Shah when the unrest broke out, you know, advising him on what to do. The Shah actually fled because, you know, he was on holiday at the time. He took a vacation and he couldn't return. Once the Ayatollah marched in, it was totally unsafe. His regime, everyone who'd remained, was summarily executed, as is the way, and often in these I'm reluctant to say less civilized, but you know, when you go around executing people, you open yourself up to be called less civilized. But he never returned, and America was really against letting him in, you know. Why should the Shah be able to come here? Because it's going to build up a huge amount of tension with the Ayatollah and his regime in Iran. Eventually they did let him in, but it turned out that he had terminal cancer and he wasn't going to be around much longer. But that did heighten tensions. And one of the major sticking points in the discussions between Iran, the new Iran, and America was the fact that America had harboured who they considered to be the great evil, the Shah. And let's not forget that broke 2,500 years of monarchy. Schiff says old Persia wasn't really that less civilized. Yeah, I know, yeah. But the thing is, like, your definition of civilization differs depending on your culture. And certain elements are really civilized. Like the whole thing that we found out about in the game where you... The way they drink tea, for example, you know? And if you get offered tea, you must accept. You know, it'd be rude not to accept. All of these customs that we're unfamiliar with in the West, they aren't uncivilized. They're just different. Some of them, like executing people, you could probably argue are. But then, what about Guantanamo? I mean, it's basically been proven that Americans tortured people in Guantanamo Bay. So, when you make comparisons there, how civilized is the American security service? Afghanistan also wasn't less civilized when people came and built a Muslim state. Well, Afghanistan's complicated. For Afghanistan, I recommend a documentary called Bitter Lake, which goes into graphic detail. It's not for... just don't watch it while you're eating, or feeling at all sensitive. It's pretty grim. But yeah, I mean, again, it was America's involvement, you could argue, that really led to problems in Afghanistan. The Soviets came first. Well, yeah, I mean, so yeah, Afghanistan's complicated. I won't go into it in this particular video because huge. I mean, that is a massive simplification. In Afghanistan, the Soviets came first, then the Islamists came afterwards. You don't mention America at all in that, which is basically letting the major culprit off the hook. From what I understand, anyway. Everyone's interpretation of history is different, and people say history is written by the victors as well. High Priest says, never turn down tea when it's offered, it's rude, and that's how wars start. The Eighth Doctor. Is that like a Doctor Who reference? I don't know, like, I'm not sure I'd want to stick a sugar cube in my mouth and then use it as a filter for drinking tea. Be a bit weird. But, you know, it's just different customs, isn't it? We're not used to it. Pretty sure we can get used to it. America supported the Taliban against the Soviets. Yes. Yeah, that is true. But like I said, I'm not going to go into Afghanistan in this particular video. But, like, yeah, feel free to give me your feedback. Like, is that something you'd like to see more of, like short story-based games? I think it makes a good format for viewing. Let me know in the chat or the comments if you're watching the video of this. And I use that to kind of decide what we might do in the future, because this isn't a long game. I expected this to be longer, take a couple of sessions to get through. It really wasn't that long. But it's the first time I've really attempted to do like a point and click kind of story game. And it was just the subject matter that drew me to it. I knew nobody else would be doing this. How many people have actually played through this on Twitch or Hitbox or live YouTube? I honestly don't know. I know there's Let's Plays videos available. Will you play some Paradoy games in the future? Oh, Paradox. Yeah. Absolutely. Like, I started a Hearts of Iron 4 campaign. And I started a Stellaris game, which ended pretty quickly when my what was it? The United Federation of UKIP with its highly xenophobic policies didn't really work out that well on Stellaris, so I had to cancel that game. But yeah, definitely Hearts of Iron's a good one because again it's relatively recent history. And we can sink our teeth into some unusual situations in that. Well, that's going to do it for this evening, guys. And thank you so much for watching. I haven't had a follow now, believe it or not, for 15 days. Not one. It's interesting, but I'm not really playing games that's going to attract new viewers. Xenophobic policies are king, says shit. Wow. Okay. Hearts of Iron is good. Adios, says Mulhernator. Yeah, thanks for sticking with this game and giving it a chance. Brilliant. I really enjoyed it. And I will see you next time.